When I was 15, I saw my father running for his life, and I did nothing to help him. But before I tell you that, let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about my childhood, which was in many ways picture perfect. And when I talk about my childhood, I talk about age 5 to 10. And when I talk about that, I talk about Pennsylvania, where I lived with my 2 brothers, my sister, 2 dogs, my mom, my dad. And for some reason, when I think of that time, all I can think of is sunny days, as if every single day was summer. And I was outside playing all day long. And it was perfect. That's what I remember. And then at night, I'd come home, and my brothers were there, my sister was there, my mom and my dad. And they're sipping their Manhattans, and they're so happy to see me. And what I remember about dinner is we used to laugh so much. And my dad was the guy who inspired so much of that laughter. He really did. And one of the things that he did that was one of the greatest things he brought to our house was this rule. If you asked for something to be passed at dinner, it would be. If you asked for a roll to be passed, boom, came right to you. Now, if you're an 8-year-old boy, this is magic. This is why every one of my friends wanted to be at my house, because it was the most fun place to be. And we would really laugh all night, but no one laughed more than my dad. He's sitting there sipping his Manhattan, keeping the stress of the work week away from the table. He was so happy. Now, my dad wasn't driven by many things, but he was driven by this. He was driven by taking care of his family, and he did it extremely well. He was a salesman by trade, and he did that so well that he was promoted to national sales manager of his company, which meant greater stress, more time away from his family, more money, no doubt, but also it meant that we would have to leave Pennsylvania and move to some place called Massachusetts, wherever that was. And there we were, 4 kids, 2 dogs, mom and dad, in a car, waving goodbye. And I can still remember my mom with her sunglasses on, reading a book or pretending to. She was crying. She just didn't want us to see. I mean, how painful it must be to leave perfection, paradise, to leave the home where your children grew up, driven by the desire to do something better for your family. How hard it must have been for my dad, because he really was the driving force of this. And he was the one we looked to smile the whole way, to tell us it would be okay. And it was okay for a while, until it wasn't. Until the stress of work came home to that table, and there was no more laughter, no more rolls being thrown, and he exchanged the brown water of Manhattans for the cool, crisp efficiency of vodka. And he sat smoking his cigarettes. Because, see, this is what men do when they're stressed, is they drink and they smoke and they sit quietly. And this man was my mountaintop. This man was the flag on my mountaintop. This is who I looked at to figure out where I existed in this world. And he had fallen. And now, so long after this, I said with no small amount of shame, I might tell you, I hated the fact that he fell, that he was weak. Which brings me back to being 15 and seeing my father running for his life. You see, I was leaning against the family car. It was parked at the high school parking lot. My dad had made arrangements to drive me home that evening after soccer practice. And he had learned something from his doctors recently. They said, if you want to live through your 50s, you've got to do 3 things very quickly. Stop drinking, which he did with the help of AA. Stop smoking, which he did immediately. 1 pack a day to nothing, cold turkey, never look back. And exercise. And so that's what I was watching. I was watching day 1 of exercise. I was watching my father run a 1/4 mile, absurdly dressed, long pants, long shirt. Each step was painful for him. 1/4 mile. I had just been running for 2 hours. And here's this man working so hard to get back to this car, to get back to me. And I did nothing. He was running for his life, and I could do nothing but be ashamed of him. If I knew then what I know now, how hard it is to be a father, if I knew then what I know now, how often I would fall if I knew then what I know now, that I would teach my own children to pass the rolls, to laugh at dinner, if I knew then what I know now. My father hadn't run a quarter of a mile. He'd been running his whole life, from his childhood, from Pennsylvania, always running back towards me. If I knew then what I know now, I would have said, I love you, Dad. I would have said, I'm proud of you, Dad. At very least, I would have opened the car door and said, let's go home. Thank you.